Final Fantasy VII is one of the greatest stories ever told, but let's be honest, it's kinda confusing. While we can't all be experts in Final Fantasy lore like this guy, I got the next best thing. Questions like, who are these whispers? Is Zack actually dead? And what is Sephiroth really planning are buzzing through everyone's brains heading into Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Even if you played the original game, there are some differences that left even the greatest of game explainers needing a second to gather the thoughts. Whether you've played every game of the franchise or this actually is your first rodeo, I got you covered. This is everything you need to know and then some about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Remake. Hello world and all who inhabit it is I the Great Saiyaran, and today we have a guest. I really respect people who are just passionate about really anything, and I think this might be one of the most passionate and knowledgeable people I've ever met on the topic of Final Fantasy. In this video we get a lot of great questions answered and some in-depth context that even I didn't know was in this game. I am beyond excited to share with you all, and I'm really thankful for this person being willing to do this video with me, so without further ado, let's get into it. So we have a guest to talk about Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hey, what's up? My name is Wade, aka Professor Noctis. I'm a real college professor where I teach religion through video games, religious studies, philosophy, a little bit of psychology, a bunch of literature, Western classics, all of this through video games, and particularly Judeo-Christian kingship through Final Fantasy 15, which has fans and detractors and all of that. But I make content on YouTube and on Twitch, and you can find me on Twitter and all that kind of stuff, talking all things Final Fantasy, video games, and religious thought and philosophy.
Awesome. I appreciate you for being on. So I just want to run through a couple of questions because I had questions about Remake when I was playing through Remake, and I've been playing through a little bit of Remake. I actually didn't finish Integrate. Don't yell at me. I didn't finish it.
It's like 4 hours, like two to 4 hours.
I got to the part where you could play the mini game, which I love. I love that mini game, the board game. Yeah, I was like, oh, okay. And then I for some reason, I don't know, it's been on my PS5 for forever. But I know that the original games were in parts. Do you think that they intentionally put this game into parts for like dramatic effect or something like that? Like, how did they, like, what was the reasoning for that?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think that it was dramatic effect. I think that in the original game, you had the full story of Final Fantasy VII across 3 discs. Yeah. And there was this idea of changing out discs, right? That a pivotal moment happens at the end of disc 1, and then you move to disc 2, and it's like this game is so big that it needed 3 discs. And with the Remake compilation and Remake trilogy, I really think that we are getting that same sense of scope again. Just with what they did with Remake, with Midgar, which was the first 4 or 5 hours of the original game, they turned it into a 40-hour adventure. And if they're keeping that scope for the entirety of the story of the entire game, then they need 3 games for that. So that excites me beyond belief. And it looks like Rebirth is going to be even much more big and grandiose than Remake was.
So I did not know. I thought Midgar was as long as it was in Remake. That's how long I thought it was.
No, it was the first 4 or 5 hours. You don't even see the world map for the first 4 or 5 hours. You're just stuck in Midgar. And I remember the moment that I stepped out of Midgar, and you have the world map, and it, like, I had played earlier Final Fantasy, so I was familiar with the world map, but to have a fully 3D world map, and it's not like open world like we imagine it today, but there are hills and mountains, and there's grasslands, and just the dynamic verticality of this map was mind-blowing to my 14-year-old brain. But that's what's really amazing. They took the first 4 or 5 hours and expanded it to 40 in story alone. Amazing stuff.
Let's hop to this other question about the original. So I personally never played the original games. I knew who Cloud was. I've seen the movies. Like, I knew about him, but I never played the game because
played Smash Brothers.
Yeah. When I got him in Smash, I said he looks familiar. I was like, I know him from a game.
Is that Goku? What is that?
So when it comes to the original game, do you have to play them to understand Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth?
Boy, it depends on who you talk to, but you're talking to me, so I'm gonna say no. I don't think that you have to play the original game. Now, because this is in 3 parts, after part 1, you have a ton of questions, right? And so like you're supposed to. Who is this guy with the black hair at the end? Like you've heard online that his name is Zach. If you want all of those answers, then yeah, you need to go play the original game. But my thought, and this is based on developer interviews, I'm taking them at their word, by the end of this trilogy, you will be able to have a self-contained story. It doesn't mean that that the old game is erased or it's unimportant. It's just that this is the retelling, a reimagining of all of it. The problem with the original game, just the 1997 game, is that it's a standalone game. But in the early 2000s, and then I guess for a decade, they had the compilation of Final Fantasy. So you've got Advent Children, the movie. You've got Before Crisis. You've got Crisis Core, the prologue, the prelude story or prequel story with Zack. You've got Dirge of Cerberus, which stars Vincent, takes place after Advent Children. And so it introduces all of these different stories, introduce new characters, new themes, new aspects of the world, and really refined it. And the problem is, when you go back to play that 97 game, it doesn't take into account all of these other characters. Vincent was completely missable in the original game, and suddenly he's got a game all of his own in Dirge of Cerberus. Not to mention, like in Zack's journey, you've got characters like, and we haven't even met him in Remake yet, but Genesis and Gilles and others that you've probably heard of. So they're having to reimagine the original game through the Remake compilation to kind of make up for some of that. Somebody once told me that they viewed Crisis Core as the prequel to the Remake trilogy, and I love that because it really does seem to be that in my case. So to answer your question, I would personally say that by the end of this, you will not have had to play the original game. But, for your own enjoyment, if you're the kind of person that can't handle mysteries for 8 years, then I'd go play it.
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed Crisis Core Reunion. And that was a really enjoyable game. And then I fell in love with Zack, and I had that love that people who had played it on PSP had, and I was like, I love this game. He's so great. And then he's back. When you played the remake. So I think one of the big major questions that you just kind of mentioned is this 8-year span that we have between games. That is going to take a long time. Do you think they'll be nice and like move the games to other platforms?
Well, we've already seen it move to PC, Remake. And I know that Sony has an exclusivity deal, but it's a timed exclusivity. I think eventually we will see it. However, Final Fantasy VII, on its release in 1997, it put PlayStation on the map. I had a PlayStation. I got a PlayStation because of Final Fantasy VII, and I know that so many people did. And so that's a long-standing legacy of relationship between Final Fantasy VII and the Sony brand. So I think that they're going to milk that for all it's worth. I would not anticipate that it's coming out to Xbox, certainly not Switch. Of course, who knows what's going on with Xbox at this point, especially I think tomorrow they've got a podcast or something. So anyway, I mean, it could, who knows? We might be playing Remake or Rebirth on Game Pass on PlayStation, who knows? But
what a world that would be.
What a world. I think eventually it will, just because Sony and Square particularly likes money. So
yeah, definitely. So you mentioned those other bits and pieces, the Vincent, what do you call it? Dungeons of Dark?
It's Dirge of Cerberus.
Dirge of Cerberus, and you got the other bits and pieces.
Funny story with all this. The easy way to remember all of this is that after Final Fantasy VII was released, all of the sequel compilation material follows the alphabet. It's Advent Children, AC, Before Crisis, BC, Crisis Core, CC, Dirge of Cerberus, DC, and now we've got Ever Crisis, EC, for the mobile. So,
have you been playing that?
I played a little bit. I'm not much of a gacha fan. I like what it does lore-wise, but I hate grinding. So,
I got it on PC, so I need to actually play a little bit more of it.
Yeah, I played a bit on Steam. That's the way to do it.
So you think that what they'll do is they'll take like Integrate wasn't a part of the original story, that was the DLC later on, or is Integrate brand new?
So Intergrade is the PS5 definitive edition of Remake, and it includes the DLC Intermission.
Yeah, Intermission, that's what I'm thinking of, Intermission.
I mean, that's canon story, right? I mean, it's a whole new story, some backstory for a character named Yuffie, and introduces characters that we had not known before, a subset of Avalanche. You've got Sonon, who's kind of a mentor to Yuffie. None of that was in the original, but it really fleshes out her character. And I'm eager to see what they do with that in Rebirth, if that's necessary to play or not. But at this point, it's fun. I think it's necessary, but I think everything's necessary, I guess.
I got you. No, that makes sense. So with like Vince's game, you think they'll like drop that as DLC?
Boy, that's hard to say because it takes place after Advent Children, and while the developers have been clear that the story of the remake trilogy is going to link up to Advent Children, because this takes place sometime after that movie, I'm not sure that they feel compelled to do that. Now, if they do that, I imagine that it might be another game. So I wouldn't want to put words in their mouth or anything like that, but I could see it being a post-release thing like Crisis Core was, Crisis Core Reunion. So what would that be? I honestly think it would be Dirge of Cerberus, Requiem, if they're going with the RE, because Requiem goes so well with Vincent.
What do you think they're going to name the third game?
I go back and forth. I actually have a video coming out, hopefully next week, but before Rebirth comes out, where I talk about some of the things that I think are going to happen in the third game. It's all just kind of conjecture based in some research. But my thinking is that it could be Reclaim, Restore, or Repair. Because I think that we're moving into a segment of the story where the world has been remade, that Sephiroth is being reborn, as well as many who have died are being reborn. And then we need to remake or restore the world to its proper order. So if I were a betting guy, I would go with Restore or Reclaim. Everything has double entendre, right?
Yeah.
And even the developers have kind of alluded to that without spoiling it. But in Remake, Sephiroth has remade the world by the end of it. And I loved that. Once I finished the game, I was like, gosh, he did it. He remade it. This isn't just a remake. This is remaking. Like, that's the theme of this game.
Yeah.
And Rebirth, man, I'm very excited about that. So what that double entendre is going to mean, I have some ideas. It's gonna be good.
So let's talk about the ending there. So at the end, when you're leaving Midgar, and the game says, like, you know how games say at the end, this is probably the last thing you'll do. You can't save. Be sure you're good to go. Yada yada. So when you do that, that was Sephiroth, like all the, what are those little, I call them hollows, Harry Potter whispers. Okay, they were there and all that. So that entire scene was him remaking the world.
Yes and no. So I put out a video recently on what are the whispers, why are they important, why are they one of my favorite parts of Final Fantasy VII Remake, even though I love the original game and a lot of people hate the whispers because they were not in the original game. What in chapter 17, at the beginning of it, Red 13 says that the whispers are arbiters of fate. They are basically agents that ensure that the flow of time goes as predicted or planned. So it's a story of predestination. That kind of really goes into some of my realms of research and expertise. And so the idea of predestination really falls under three different types of understanding. Number one, that there's a foreknowledge of the divine. In this case, it's going to be the life stream. Secondly, there is an idea of providence, that the divine, or the life stream in this case, has a certain opinion about how things should go. And then thirdly, that with predestination, there's a governance that has to happen to keep things on track. And so the whispers are, I almost liken it to angels who are keeping things on track. Okay, if anybody steps out of line, the governing agents, the whispers, are going to put them back in line. Those that live or are meant to live have to live, right? They're going to heal them, like with Barrett in the Shinra Tower. Those that are supposed to die, even if they evade death, they're going to die. And so that was a really interesting piece. Now, with the defeat of the Whispers, this is a really interesting thing because the party is convinced that something is going on with the Whispers. Maybe they're being manipulated, even though they are agents of the planet. Maybe they're being manipulated by Sephiroth, or we don't really know her that well by the end of Remake, but by Genova, who is this kind of specimen creature that we'll learn more about in Rebirth in Shinra Tower. In fact, one of the Sephiroth clones, or the cloaked figures, jumps off of the building with her, holding her. He escapes with her. And so she's on the loose now. So the idea behind all of this is that what if the planet's governing agents are being manipulated to some degree? When the party defeats the Whispers, the governance of the planet is subdued. And what I mean by that is that the predestiny arranged by the planet, by the life stream, no longer has the final word. Sephiroth, who has some level of foreknowledge that we don't know yet, but you do if you played the original game, has some level of foreknowledge of what the planet intends, is able to act outside the will of the planet now. And that is what Chapter 18 really means.
Okay.
He is going against the perfect, immutable, divine will of the planet. Aerith realizes this and tries to explain it as much as she can to the rest of the party, but she says these Whispers have to be taken care of. The question is, what happens after they're gone? And are they gone? And if they are still existing, do they have any power now? And those are the real questions for me going into Rebirth, because we know the Whispers show up from trailers, but what do they do now that they've been defeated? So
that's good. Yeah. Because with the Whispers, I saw that people were saying like this wasn't really in the game, and to me, playing Remake, I'm like, why aren't they? Because they made sense within that story. So that's really cool. Okay. So if we look at Rebirth or Remake, and we saw Remake ends. So Remake ends 4 hours into the original. Let's just whatever. If we look at Rebirth, where do you think that will end? Because I know that they've said it's like what, 40 to 60 hours, something like that.
So they've told us where it's going to end, according to the original game's plot. Now, moving and taking away some things here and there, we know that it's going to end at a place called the Forgotten Capital. That is the final scene, the final chapter. Maybe the most iconic moment in all of video games takes place at the Forgotten Capital. And so the idea is that thing happens and it brings the party to the absolute lowest point. That is probably at the 60-65% mark of the original game. So they've got a lot of ground to cover between Midgar and that point. And it seems like, it's going to be double the size story-wise of the original. Especially with open world and stuff. If you spent 30 to 40 hours on the original, my bet is that you're going to spend 80 to 100.
Yeah, I looking at the game in scope, and we got different things now. We got voice acting, we got cutscenes, we got cinematics, we got things that make the game more visually appealing and attractive. Yeah. That does in itself add time. So I'm thinking of, okay, if you're gonna tell me this story that someone read, because reading is faster than them talking. Because you can mash that A button. If you're gonna tell the same kind of story in this close amount of time, like that's a lot that we're gonna get in Rebirth. I think Rebirth is maybe gonna initially just throw a bunch at us all at once, and then we're gonna be like, because let's be honest, most people probably won't play past 20 hours until like next year, so they'll put the game down. But for people who are actually interested in the story, we're gonna play it and we're gonna be like, oh my god, it's the greatest thing ever, and then there's like 40 more hours after that. That's what I'm expecting, at least.
I could easily see myself putting 200 hours into this. I put 105, 108 in Final Fantasy 16 the first time I played it through. In Remake, I think I put in 80 hours the first time that I played. But I'm an idiot when it comes to first playthroughs. I'm just like, everything everywhere. Look at that, mountain. I was just distracted.
Oh, you're not the yellow paint guy?
I am not the yellow paint guy. It does not break the immersion for me. I post on Twitter, I live in a world where they paint yellow parking lot line. So I'm okay with people guiding me, you know. It brings some order.
Let's talk about Zach really quickly. I love Zach
Okay.
now after playing Reunion.
Yeah.
So do you think you talked about the whispers correcting things? You think they're gonna correct Zach?
It depends on what you are meaning by correcting. So I do a series of lecture videos
Mhm.
on the games that I play, and I'm in the middle of a lecture playthrough and thesis videos on VII Remake. The second thesis video I published was on Eligor and Sephiroth's Endgame, and I have a lot to say about Zach in that. Here's what I say about it. I think that Zach is dead. I think that he died. I don't think that we are being fooled. Instead, what I believe, and this is kind of with an educated guess of what's going on in the original, Sephiroth wanted to create a stasis or stagnant life stream in which the souls of the dead do not return to the planet, but they stay in this stasis. And then, given the events that will likely happen by the end of Rebirth, Sephiroth wants to wound the planet in such a way that he is able to absorb the spirit energy of those who have died, meaning he wants to absorb Zack, Biggs, allegedly Wedge and Jesse, though we don't have confirmation that they exist in Zack's timeline yet. Anyone that dies, he's able to absorb that. And so his ultimate goal is that all life, all people everywhere are going to die, and the planet itself dies. And then for him to absorb all that spirit energy into himself and essentially become a new god, reigning alongside Genova as they recreate reality. That's what I think is happening. Is Zack alive? Kind of, but not really. And I don't think that Zack even realizes that. I don't think that it's like a sixth sense sort of thing. I don't think that. But what I do think is that there is this alternate reality where every soul that ever was and ever will be kind of merges and coexists, and they are waiting, maybe even acting against a Sephiroth who is trying to absorb them. That's what I think's happening, but again, that's just theory crafting. It's interesting to say, could he be alive? Sure. But if he's alive, what does that do to the party? The other thing that could be happening is Sephiroth, through the power of Genova, manipulating the memory of the planet? Now, that is a loaded statement if you haven't played the original game, but that's something that she can do, right? She can manipulate memories so that people see things that are false. This is where you get into a false narrator or a untrustworthy narrator of the original game, which is a classic trope in that. And if that's the case, what does it mean for Cloud to believe that Zack is alive? At the end of Crisis Core, Zack tells Cloud, "You are my living legacy." What does that do to him if Zack's still alive? He's no longer a living legacy. It negates that relationship in some ways. And that's a sadistic manipulation that Sephiroth could be playing on Cloud. So we're gonna be in for a ride. Yeah, it's gonna be a ride for Rebirth, I'm telling you.
That gave me chills. Like seeing the end of Reunion and seeing Zack die, and then seeing the trailer for Rebirth, and it's like, wait, what? You know, it was. Yeah. Oh man, so yeah, I'm super excited about this, man. Do you have anything you want to add or anything you want to say about yourself, your channel, anything you got coming up, any big projects?
Yeah, I mean, on my channel, I do 3 primary things. Number 1, I do what I call lecture plays. They are Let's Plays where I pause for lectures. And so it's not your classic lecture play. I lecture for a living. I do teaching stuff. So we're going to explore everything from psychology, philosophy, religion, literature, tropes, you name it, in all of these long form lectures. I also do thesis videos. These are basic questions. I did one on what is Final Fantasy. I did one on what makes a good side quest according to science. I've done a series of thesis videos on VII Remake as well. And then also I'm starting with Rebirth, actually, a series of videos called New Game Chronicles, where I'm doing Chronicles of Rebirth. Instead of me doing a live play of that, I'm going to play through it and then offer my spur of the moment immediate responses to what I've just played. And I think that's going to be a really, really fun thing. I am starting with my Final Fantasy 15 class on February 20th. We'll have started the Final Fantasy 15 playthrough for the class, where actual students from my university at Alabama, they're going to be in the chat. We're going to have a great time playing through, and they'll be studying up for a test, but everybody else just kind of hangs out. So yeah, that's the content I do. It's a lot of fun. We learn something. It's a good hang. So
hey, roll tide, man.
Yeah, roll tide.
I appreciate you so much for being on and helping me make this video. Yeah. Once again, huge shout out to Professor Noctis. Be sure to check out his channel for some amazing Final Fantasy content. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is finally here, and I'm beyond excited to hop into it. For more JRPG content, check out my review of Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, or even take a look at my Helldivers 2 review if you want something different. Also, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all the good stuff, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.